My name is Claire. I'm 41 years old, and 3 weeks after I buried my husband, his family sat me down at my own kitchen table and told me I had 30 days to move out. I want to start further back, though, because to understand how calmly I handled that moment, you need to understand everything that came before it. 7 years earlier, Marcus and I met at a mutual friend's barbecue when I was 34. He was an electrician, funny in a dry, understated way, the kind of man who remembered small details, that I liked my coffee with too much cream, that I hated when people chewed with their mouths open, that I'd once mentioned offhand I'd always wanted a house with a porch swing. 2 years into dating, he found one. A little blue house on Larkspur Lane with a porch swing already hanging from rusted chains, like it had been waiting for us. The problem was money. Marcus's credit was a mess from a bad business partnership years before we met, and mine wasn't perfect either, but I'd been saving since I was 22, first for nothing in particular, then for exactly this. When we sat down with the mortgage broker, the numbers only worked one way. The loan, the deposit, the deed, all in my name alone. Marcus would contribute to the mortgage payments, we agreed, and once his credit recovered, we'd add him to the title. Later, we said. We were young enough, or maybe just naive enough, to think later was guaranteed. Then, 2 years in, Marcus's kidneys started failing. What followed was 18 months of dialysis, specialists, a transplant that didn't take, a second transplant that did. Our savings went first, then a chunk of my retirement account. Later, quietly slid off the calendar. By the time Marcus was healthy again, I was the one who got sick, a slow, expensive autoimmune diagnosis that ate 2 more years and another wave of our finances. We joked about it, darkly, the way people do when the alternative is falling apart. We're just taking turns being the sick one, Marcus used to say. At least we're consistent. Through all of it, the house stayed in my name. Not out of distrust, never that, but because there was never a stable enough moment to justify the paperwork and the fees to change it. Marcus used to tease me. Technically, I'm just renting from my own wife. I'd tell him rent was due in kisses, and he'd pay up. His family never knew any of this. Marcus was fiercely private about money, especially around his mother, Diane, who had a habit of treating every financial detail like public property to be discussed, judged, and redistributed as she saw fit. It's not her business how we manage our house, he told me once, after Diane had asked, not so subtly, whether we planned to leave the property to Renee's kids someday, since Marcus and I never had children of our own. He'd shut that conversation down fast. I loved him for it. The diagnosis that changed everything. Marcus was 52 when the second illness came, this time for him, and this time it didn't respond to treatment. Pancreatic cancer. 11 months from diagnosis to the funeral. I won't describe all 11 months here, because some things are mine to keep, but I will say this. In the last few weeks, when he could barely speak above a whisper, he made sure I understood something. The house is yours, he said, gripping my hand with what strength he had left. Only yours. Don't let my mother tell you otherwise. Promise me you won't let her push you around after I'm gone. I promised. I didn't fully understand yet how soon I'd need to keep that promise. The funeral. Marcus's funeral was small, exactly as he wanted: close friends, a handful of coworkers from the electrical company, and family. Diane cried theatrically in the front row, dabbing at eyes that, I noticed, never seemed to actually produce tears. Renee, his younger sister, stood beside her, already fielding calls about estate matters, which struck me as fast, even for grief. Todd, Marcus's older brother, mostly stayed quiet, arms crossed, watching everything the way he always did, like a man calculating angles. I got through the day the way you get through anything unbearable, by not thinking about it directly, by focusing on the next 5 minutes instead of the rest of my life. People hugged me and told me Marcus was in a better place. I nodded and thanked them and felt nothing and everything at once. 3 days after the funeral, Diane called to check in. She asked, almost in passing, whether I'd started thinking about my living situation. I told her I hadn't thought about anything except getting through each day. She said, of course, in a tone that made it clear she'd already started thinking about it plenty. 3 weeks after I buried my husband, 3 weeks, not even a full month, Diane, Renee, and Todd showed up at my house unannounced on a Sunday afternoon. I let them in because that's what you do, even when your body is screaming at you to close the door. We sat at my kitchen table, the one Marcus and I had bought secondhand and refinished ourselves one summer, sanding it down on the back porch while listening to old records. Diane didn't waste time on pleasantries. The house was always meant to stay in the family, she said, not even looking up from the coffee I'd made her. Marcus would have wanted his sister to have it. She has the kids, the space would help her so much. You can find an apartment, something manageable, for just you. Renee, beside her, was already scrolling through paint swatches on her phone, tilting the screen toward Todd. I'm thinking a soft sage for the living room. Warmer than what Claire has now. I felt something in my chest go very still and very cold, but I didn't argue. I didn't cry, though God, I wanted to. I just nodded slowly, thanked them for stopping by, and told them I needed some time alone. I walked them to the door and closed it behind them, and then I stood in my hallway for a long time, staring at nothing. What none of them knew, what Marcus had deliberately never told his own mother, because he said, more than once, that it wasn't her business, was that the deed to this house had only ever had one name on it. Mine. They were dividing up a property that was never theirs to divide, and they didn't even know it. I could have told them right then. Ended it in 30 seconds. But grief does strange things to a person, and some small, tired part of me wanted to see exactly how far they'd go if they thought I'd let them. I let them believe what they wanted to believe for one more week. On Tuesday, Renee showed up with 3 flattened moving boxes, just in case, and started stacking them in my garage without asking. When I found her out there, she smiled at me like she was doing me a favor. Figured it'd be easier to start early. No rush, obviously. On Wednesday, Diane called a locksmith, my locksmith, whose number she'd apparently gotten from an old holiday card Marcus and I had sent years ago, to get a spare key made for the family. The locksmith, thankfully, called me first to confirm, confused about why a woman who wasn't on any paperwork was requesting keys to my house. I told him, politely, to disregard the request entirely. On Thursday, Todd sent me a text message that I still have saved, word for word. Don't make this messy. Sign the house over and everyone's happy. Mom's already stressed enough. I didn't respond. I just sat with it, feeling something harden inside me that had been soft and shattered for weeks. Grief hadn't left. But it was making room now for something else, a clarity I hadn't expected. On Friday, I called Mr. Whitfield, the attorney. Mr. Whitfield had been our family attorney since Marcus and I bought the house 7 years earlier. He'd drawn up the original deed, and years later, after Marcus's first health scare, he'd helped us formalize a will and a life insurance policy, both, like the house, naming me as sole beneficiary, because at the time, Marcus insisted on it. If something happens to me, he'd told the attorney, only half joking, the last thing I want is my mother trying to run Claire's life through my estate. I told Mr. Whitfield everything, the visit, the moving boxes, the locksmith, Todd's text. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Claire, they have no legal standing here at all. None. But if you want, I can help you make that very clear. On day 7, I invited Diane, Renee, and Todd back to the kitchen table. I told them I'd made a decision about the house and wanted to discuss it with all of them present. Diane sounded almost pleased on the phone, already assuming which direction that decision would go. This time, I wasn't alone. Mr. Whitfield arrived 10 minutes before they did, sat calmly at the end of the table, and set a single folder in front of him. When the doorbell rang, I let them in and gestured toward the kitchen without much explanation. Diane's eyes flicked to Mr. Whitfield with mild curiosity, then dismissed him as some family friend or grief counselor. Renee sat down, already pulling out her phone again. Todd remained standing, arms crossed, near the doorway, his usual position, watching. Before anyone discusses moving boxes, Mr. Whitfield said, calm and even, I think it's important you all see whose name is actually on this property. He opened the folder and turned it so it faced them. Diane's face went white. Renee's thumb froze mid-scroll. Todd stepped closer, read the document twice, like the words might rearrange themselves into something more favorable if he stared hard enough. This house, Mr. Whitfield continued, along with Marcus's life insurance policy and the remainder of his estate, was solely in Claire's name at the time of his passing. There is no property here for the family to distribute. There never was. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and went quiet. Diane recovered first, her voice climbing toward the tone I remembered from years of small, needling comments. Marcus would have wanted. Marcus, I said, cutting in quietly, but with a steadiness that surprised even me, spent the last year of his life telling me how exhausted he was. Not just from the cancer. From being caught between keeping peace with his mother and being honest with his wife. In the end, he chose honesty with me. I'm choosing it now with you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. 7 years of biting my tongue at family dinners, of smoothing over Diane's comments, of letting things go for the sake of peace, all of it had built toward this one moment, and I let it land exactly as heavy as it needed to. Renee left first. She didn't say a word, just stood, grabbed her bag, and walked out so fast she slammed the front door hard enough that a picture frame fell off the hallway wall. It was one of me and Marcus on our wedding day, the two of us laughing at something just out of frame. I picked it up carefully, checked the glass for cracks, found none, and hung it back exactly where it belonged. Diane stayed another few minutes, sputtering something about how family should come before paperwork, which Mr. Whitfield calmly and politely declined to engage with. Eventually she left too, her heels clicking hard against my porch steps, the porch swing Marcus had found for me, still hanging there, catching the late afternoon light. Todd was the last to go. At the door, he paused, and for once didn't have the calculating look on his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This wasn't right, what we did." It was the only apology I got from any of them that day. 2 days later, he texted again, a longer message this time, admitting that Diane had pushed the plan and he and Renee had gone along with it without thinking it through, that he was ashamed of the locksmith and the moving boxes, that he hoped I could forgive them eventually. I appreciated it, even if it didn't undo the week. Diane never apologized. Not that week, not that month. The last I heard, she was still telling extended family a version of events where I had cut them off out of spite. I've made peace with the fact that some people will always need a villain in their story, and I stopped auditioning for the role a long time ago. It's been 6 months now since that afternoon at the kitchen table. I still wake up every morning in the house Marcus, and I built our life in, the porch swing still creaking gently in the mornings, the refinished kitchen table still bearing the faint sanding marks we never quite smoothed out, the picture from our wedding day still hanging straight on the hallway wall. They wanted me to leave quietly, grieving and compliant, while they redecorated a life that was never theirs to take. Instead, I stayed. I finally got to grieve my husband in peace, in our home, without anyone else's name on the door, without anyone else's plans stacked in my garage. Some inheritances aren't about money or property at all. Mine was a promise Marcus made me keep: don't let my mother push you around after I'm gone, and every morning I wake up in this house, porch swing creaking outside the window, I know I kept it.